The Neuralink notification pulsed against Marcus Chen's temple at 2:47 a.m., dragging him from sleep with the kind of urgency reserved for emergencies. His augmented reality overlay flickered to life, projecting Keisha's face in pale holographic blue above his pillow. "Marcus." Her voice cracked through the audio implant. "It's Jamie. They found him in the lower sectors. He's alive," but Marcus was already moving, pulling on yesterday's shirt from the chair beside his cot. The fabric was worn thin at the collar, a relic from before smart textiles became standard issue for anyone above poverty status. His fingers fumbled with the buttons while his mind raced through possibilities. Each worse than the last. How bad? Bad enough that the medevac wouldn't take him without payment authorization. "I'm covering it from the center's emergency fund, but Marcus, we're talking about 20,000 credits, 20,000. Nearly half their annual budget." Marcus's throat tightened as he grabbed his jacket, the same one he'd worn for 6 years, patched so many times the original material was more memory than fact. "Send me the coordinates." The location data streamed directly into his visual cortex, a burning red waypoint overlaid on his perception of reality. Lower Sector 9. Of course. The part of the city where the hollow billboards didn't bother projecting. Where the environmental controls barely functioned, where people like Jamie ended up when the world decided they didn't matter enough to save. Marcus's apartment was a single room above the Hope Harbor Community Center, exactly 147 square feet. He knew because the city's housing algorithm reminded him every month when it pinged his account for rent, always accompanied by a helpful suggestion that he qualified for upward mobility opportunities if he'd just accept one of the corporate positions that flooded his inbox. Algorithmic headhunters never slept, never stopped trying to optimize human capital into profitable arrangements. He ignored them all. The center's ground floor was dark except for the emergency lighting strips that glowed along the baseboards. Marcus had installed them himself after the city cut their power grid allocation, claiming budget reallocation toward higher-density population zones. Translation: neighborhoods where people could afford to pay premium rates for uninterrupted electricity. His neural link buzzed again. Not Keisha this time. The caller ID made his stomach drop. "Mom." Marcus stood in the stairwell, hand on the railing, and let it ring 4 times before answering. His mother's face materialized in his vision, high definition enough that he could see the perfect makeup, the strategic lighting, the coordinated aesthetic of her bedroom in the Chen family estate. Everything calculated, nothing accidental. "Marcus." Helen Chen's voice carried that particular tone she used when she was about to ask something he wouldn't want to answer. "I know it's early, it's fine." He started down the stairs, each step echoing in the empty center. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm calling because I need you to attend a dinner this weekend. Saturday evening. 7 o'clock. The estate." Marcus reached the front door and paused, pressing his forehead against the cool reinforced glass. Through the smudged surface, he could see the street outside, cracked pavement, flickering streetlights, the hulking shadows of abandoned buildings the city hadn't bothered to demolish. His reflection stared back at him. Ghostly and tired. "Mom, I can't. We have a program graduation on Saturday. 23 kids finishing their certification courses. I promised them I'd be there. Reschedule it. It's been planned for 6 months, Marcus." The single word carried the weight of 34 years of maternal expectation. "This isn't a request. I'm announcing the family inheritance distribution. Your presence is mandatory." His jaw clenched. Through the audio implant, he could hear the perfectly calibrated background music in her room, the kind that cost extra on streaming services, the kind that marked you as someone who could afford beauty even in silence. "Why now?" "Because your father's will stipulated that the announcement occur on the 10th anniversary of his death." "That's Saturday." Helen's image shifted, leaning forward with an expression that might have been concern on anyone else. On her, it looked like strategy. "Your siblings will be there. Patricia will be there. The family attorney will be there. You need to be there." The family attorney. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. "You hired someone new?" "I did." someone extremely qualified to handle complex estate matters. His mother's smile was the kind that appeared in corporate promotional materials. You'll like her. Very sharp. Very thorough, her. Marcus filed that away, wondering why the pronoun felt significant. Fine. I'll be there, wear something appropriate. I'll try not to embarrass you, Marcus, but he'd already terminated the connection, letting her image dissolve into nothing. The street was worse than his overlay had indicated. Marcus's neural link automatically adjusted his perception, dimming the visual noise, filtering out the graffiti and decay to present a cleaner version of reality. He disabled the filter. He always did. There was something obscene about letting technology lie to him about what the world actually looked like. Jamie was unconscious when Marcus reached the scene, his young face swollen and bruised, blood dried in dark streaks across his temple. The paramedics had him stabilized but weren't moving him. One of them, a woman with chrome-plated augments running up both arms, glanced at Marcus with the kind of exhausted sympathy that came from seeing too many kids bleeding out in ditches. You Marcus Chen, he nodded. The one who runs Hope Harbor, that's me. She tapped something on her wrist interface, and her expression softened fractionally. My cousin went through your program 3 years ago. He's working tech support now at Helios Corporation, supports his whole family. She looked down at Jamie, then back at Marcus. We'll get him to Memorial. Pro bono. Marcus felt his throat constrict. You don't have to. Yeah, we do. She signaled her partner. Come on, Tommy. Let's move. They loaded Jamie with practiced efficiency. Marcus rode in the back, holding the kid's hand, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical regularity. 17 years old. Straight-A student. Headed to university next fall on a scholarship. Marcus had personally written 3 recommendation letters to secure. And some crew from the old neighborhood had decided that leaving gang life made you a traitor worth beating within an inch of death. The hospital was chaos rendered sterile and efficient. Marcus waited in a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and desperation, watching people flicker past with the glazed expressions of those living through crisis. His neural link kept pinging him with notifications, messages from the center. News alerts, 3 more job offers from corporations whose names he'd blocked a dozen times before, and 1 message from a number he didn't recognize. The text appeared directly in his visual field, looking forward to Saturday. It's been too long. I am. Marcus stared at the letters, his pulse suddenly loud in his ears. Isabel Moreau. It couldn't be. Could it? His fingers hovered over the reply function, then stopped. If his mother had hired Isabel as the family attorney, if Isabel was going to be at that dinner, if she'd somehow become part of this whole inheritance circus, he deleted the message without responding. Jamie woke up 6 hours later, disoriented and hurting but alive. Marcus sat beside his bed and let the kid cry without saying anything stupid about it being okay, because it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. When Jamie finally spoke, his voice was rough with pain and something deeper. They said I forgot where I came from. Marcus squeezed his shoulder. You didn't forget. You just chose somewhere better to go. Dante was there. My brother. Jamie's eyes were wet. He was the one who held me down while the others, he couldn't finish. Dante. Marcus remembered him. Had tried to reach him 2 years ago, before the kid disappeared into the lower sectors entirely. Another one he'd failed to save. I should have stayed, Jamie whispered. Kept my head down. Maybe then, no. Marcus's voice was firm. You chose life. They chose violence. That's on them, not you. But later, standing in the hospital parking structure, Marcus wondered if that was true. If maybe his entire approach was fundamentally broken. If saving people one at a time while the system ground millions more into dust was just elaborate self-deception, a way to feel righteous while accomplishing nothing that actually mattered. His neural link pinged. Another message from I.M., you always were terrible at answering. Some things never change. This time he replied, how did you get this number? The response came immediately, your mother. We've been working together for 18 months. You really should check your email more often. 18 months. Jesus. Marcus leaned against his car, a 2031 Honda that predated neural integration, ran on actual gasoline, and had logged enough miles that the odometer had rolled over twice. The paint was oxidized to a dull gray, the passenger door didn't lock, and the air conditioning had died in 2039. He loved it more than anything he owned. "What are you doing working for my family?" "Long story. I'll tell you Saturday. Wear something nice. Although knowing you, you'll show up in that thrift store blazer you've had since college." Marcus looked down at himself. He was, in fact, wearing that exact blazer. The fabric was so worn it felt like breathing, the elbows patched with material that didn't quite match, the lining torn in 3 places he'd never bothered to repair. He'd bought it for $8 from a vintage shop in Sector 4, back when Isabel had still thought his fashion choices were endearing rather than embarrassing. "It's a good blazer, it's a terrible blazer. But I always liked you in it anyway." He stared at those words for a long moment, feeling something twist in his chest. Then he pocketed his phone, the actual physical device he carried because neural banking always felt invasive, and drove home through streets that got progressively cleaner as the sectors counted upward. Watching the city transform from ruins to revival to pristine corporate elegance, the Chin family estate was in Sector 1, naturally. Where else would it be? The next 3 days crawled past in a haze of crisis management and dread. Marcus taught his classes, met with his kids, processed paperwork for grants that would probably get rejected, and tried not to think about Saturday. He failed spectacularly at that last part, Keisha noticed, obviously. She'd worked at Hope Harbor for 6 years and had developed an almost supernatural ability to read Marcus's moods. "You're spiraling," she announced on Friday afternoon, leaning against his office doorframe. The office was a generous term for a converted storage closet with a desk salvaged from a bankrupt middle school. "What happened? Family dinner tomorrow, ah." She nodded knowingly. "The inheritance thing your mom mentioned last month, that's the one, and you're dreading it because your siblings are going to spend the entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about your life choices while your mother pretends everything is fine and you sit there taking it because you're pathologically incapable of defending yourself." Marcus looked up from the grant application he'd been pretending to read. "That's very specific, it's also very accurate." Keisha sat down in the plastic chair that constituted the office's only other furniture. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." "Why?" "They don't respect you. They don't understand what you do. They think you're wasting your potential by working here instead of climbing some corporate ladder to nowhere. They're still my family. Family is who shows up when it matters." "When's the last time any of them came here? Volunteered? Asked about your work? Cared about these kids as anything other than statistics to pity?" "Never." The answer was never. Marcus returned his attention to the grant application, but the words swam meaninglessly across the screen. "There's something else," Keisha said. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one you get when you're thinking about her." Marcus's fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. He didn't ask who her was. They both knew, she's the attorney. "The one handling the inheritance," Keisha whistled low. "Well, that's going to be interesting, that's one word for it. What happened between you two?" "You've never told me." Marcus closed his laptop, suddenly exhausted. "I broke her heart. Or she broke mine. Depends on who's telling the story. What's your version?" He was quiet for a long moment, remembering. The fight. The ultimatum. The way Isabel had looked at him when he'd walked out of her father's office, rejecting everything she'd thought they were building together. "I chose this." He gestured vaguely at the office, the center, the entire world he'd built from nothing. "She chose her family's legacy. We both thought we were right. We probably both were, and now she's working for your mother. Apparently, that's not a coincidence." "No," Marcus agreed. "It's definitely not." Saturday arrived with the inevitability of taxes and entropy. Marcus showered in the center's cramped bathroom, staring at himself in the mirror that had lost most of its silvering. 34 years old. Premature gray threading through his hair at the temples. Lines around his eyes from squinting at too many screens and bad lighting. He looked tired. He looked poor. He looked exactly like what he was, someone who'd chosen purpose over profit and paid for it in every visible way. He put on the blazer Isabel had mentioned. It really was terrible. The shoulders didn't sit right anymore, and there was a stain on the lapel that no amount of cleaning had managed to remove. But it fit him like memory, comfortable and worn and entirely his own. The thrift store down the street was run by an elderly man named Mr. Park who'd been in the neighborhood longer than the center. Marcus stopped in to buy a tie. Big event? Mr. Park asked, pulling out a selection of options that ranged from aggressively ugly to merely dated. Family dinner, ah. The kind where you have to prove you're doing okay even though they think you're failing at life. Marcus managed a laugh. Something like that. Mr. Park studied him for a moment. Then reached under the counter and produced a tie that was actually decent, dark blue, subtle pattern, probably worth more than everything else in the store combined. This was my son's, the old man said. He wore it to his college graduation. Would have wanted you to have it. Marcus knew Mr. Park's son had died 3 years ago, overdose in the lower sectors, another casualty of a system that ground up the vulnerable and called it efficiency. He knew because he'd been the one who'd called Mr. Park from the hospital, holding a stranger's hand while the kid slipped away. I can't, you can. You will. Mr. Park pressed the tie into his hands. Your people helped my grandson get into that apprenticeship program. He starts Monday. So you take the tie, and you go to your family dinner, and you remember that some of us know what you're worth. Marcus's eyes stung. He took the tie. The bus ride to Sector 1 took 47 minutes, each passing block marking a steady climb in socioeconomic status. The buildings got taller, cleaner, shinier. The streets developed trees, then gardens, then elaborate landscaping that required full-time maintenance. By the time Marcus reached his stop, the air itself smelled different, filtered, perfumed, expensive. The Chen estate sprawled across 3 acres of prime real estate that could have housed 200 families. Instead it housed his mother, rattling around in 12,000 square feet of architectural arrogance. Marcus walked up the driveway, passing a Tesla that belonged to Victoria and a Porsche that had to be Daniel's, and found his ancient Honda looked even more pathetic than usual by comparison. He was reaching for the doorbell when his neural link pinged with a message, "Don't ring. Come around to the garden entrance. We need to talk first." I am. Marcus hesitated, then followed the stone path that curved around the house toward the gardens his mother maintained with obsessive precision. The evening sun cast long shadows across perfectly manicured lawns, making everything look like an advertisement for a life he'd never wanted. Isabel was waiting by the fountain, and Marcus forgot how to breathe. 10 years. It had been 10 years since he'd seen her in person, since they'd stood in her father's office and burned their future to ash with words neither of them could take back. She'd been beautiful then. She was devastating now. The expensive suit she wore was cut to emphasize everything he'd tried to forget. Her dark hair was pulled back in a style that probably had a French name he didn't know. Her augments were the latest generation, subtle and sophisticated, the kind that cost more than he made in 5 years. Everything about her screamed success, power, arrival, and she was looking at him like he was water in a desert. "Hello, Marcus." His throat was dry. "Isabel. You wore the blazer." Her smile was complicated, layered with things he couldn't parse. "I should have bet money on it. You said to wear something nice, I said to wear something appropriate. There's a difference." She moved closer, and he caught her perfume, something expensive and subtle, probably custom blended. "But it suits you." The whole deliberately poor aesthetic. Very committed to the bit. "It's not a bit, no," she agreed, and something in her expression softened. "It never was it? That's what I could never understand. You actually believe in all this." "All what, this?" She gestured vaguely toward the lower sectors they couldn't see from here but both knew existed. The noble poverty. The selfless service. The whole martyrdom of choosing principle over prosperity. Marcus felt anger kindle in his chest. "I'm not a martyr. No, you're just someone who turned down everything I offered, everything your family offered." "Same thing. That's exactly the problem." They stared at each other across 3 feet of distance that felt like continents. Isabel broke first, laughing quietly. bitterly, "We're going to do this again, aren't we? Stand here arguing about worth and wealth and which of us made the right choice." She turned away, trailing her fingers through the fountain's water. "Your mother hired me for a reason, Marcus, I know. To handle the inheritance, no. To investigate your family. To determine which of her children understands what wealth is actually for." Isabel looked back at him. "She's been testing all of you. For 18 months. And you have no idea what I've found." Marcus's pulse kicked up. "What are you talking about?" "Inside. At dinner. You'll find out with everyone else." She moved closer again, close enough that he could feel the heat of her, smell her perfume, remember with painful clarity what it had felt like to touch her. "But I need you to know something first." "What?" "That I'm sorry. For how we ended. For what I said. For choosing my father's legacy over," her voice caught. "Over us, Isabel, and I need you to know that seeing you again, reading about your work, understanding what you've built." She reached up, her fingers brushing his lapel, straightening the terrible blazer with something that looked like affection. "It broke my heart all over again. But this time in a different way." The garden was very quiet. Somewhere in the house, Marcus could hear voices, his siblings arriving, the dinner beginning without them. But here, in this moment, there was only Isabel looking at him like he was something precious she'd lost and found again. "We should go in," he said, "in a minute." Her hand was still on his chest, palm flat against his heart. "I want to remember this. Before everything changes." "Changes how?" She smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut. "You'll see." Then she kissed his cheek, a ghost of contact that sent electricity down his spine, and walked toward the house without looking back. Marcus stood there for a long moment, trying to remember how to breathe normally. Trying to prepare for whatever was waiting inside. He failed at both. The dining room was exactly as he remembered, obscenely large, decorated with art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, set with china that was too expensive to actually use. His family was already seated around the table, a tableau of wealth and judgment. Victoria sat with her husband Robert, both of them projecting the kind of casual confidence that came from never having worried about money. Daniel was filming something on his neural overlay, probably streaming to his followers, with his fiancée Sienna posing beside him. Aunt Patricia held court at one end, dripping in jewelry that could have funded Hope Harbor for a decade. They all looked up when Marcus entered. The silence was immediate and cutting. "Well," Victoria said, her voice bright with false warmth. "Look who made it. We were starting to think you'd forgotten." Marcus slid into the chair at the far end of the table, as far from everyone else as the room's geometry allowed. "Traffic was bad, I'm sure." Daniel smirked. "The bus routes can be so unpredictable, Daniel," Helen said sharply, but she was smiling. Always smiling. The kind of smile that meant nothing and everything. "I'm just saying, if Marcus needs help with transportation, I could probably arrange something. My company has a car share program for low-income users. Very affordable." The table laughed, polite and vicious. Marcus said nothing, focusing on the water glass in front of him with single-minded intensity. Then Isabel walked in, and every ounce of oxygen vanished from the room. The transport pod hummed beneath Marcus Chen's feet as it carried him toward the Moreau estate, suspended 300 meters above the glittering sprawl of New Seattle. He watched his reflection in the curved glass, 32 years old, wearing a suit he'd bought at a discount outlet, the fabric programmed to mimic expensive designer patterns but failing in the way cheap things always did. The seams didn't quite align. The color shifted a half-second too slow when he moved. His neural implant pinged softly behind his right ear. A message from Keisha, his assistant at Hope Harbor Community Center. "Marcus, the Thompson twins are asking for you. Their mom got evicted again. They're scared." He closed his eyes and composed a response through thought interface, the words forming in his mind and transmitting instantly. "Tell them I'll be back tonight. We'll figure it out." The pod decelerated as it approached the estate's private dock. Through the window, Marcus could see the mansion sprawling across its own floating platform, all gleaming chrome and reactive glass that shifted colors with the sunset. Solar wings stretched from the roof like a metallic peacock's tail. Hovering drones tended to the vertical gardens that cascaded down the building's western face. His sister Victoria's transport was already docked, a Lexus Aeroglide, the kind that cost more than he'd made in 5 years. The pod doors whispered open. Marcus stepped onto marble that had been quarried on Mars, according to the estate's welcome hologram. The AI's voice was warm and feminine, designed to sound like family. Welcome, Marcus Chen. You are the 7th arrival. Your mother, Helen Chen, is in the solarium. Your siblings Victoria, Daniel, and Patricia are in the main atrium. Refreshments are being served. Tonight's gathering is a celebration of Richard Moreau's life and legacy. Please proceed to the atrium, Richard Moreau. Marcus felt the name settle in his chest like cold stone. His father's former business partner, the man who'd helped build Chen Moreau Technologies 40 years ago, before the bitter split that had divided 2 families. Before Marcus's father, David Chen, had walked away from billions to start a community foundation. Before Marcus had spent his childhood watching his mother work 3 jobs to keep them housed and fed while the Moreau family ascended to the top of New Seattle's elite, he'd been surprised when the invitation had arrived on his neural feed 3 weeks ago. More surprised when his mother had insisted he attend. Richard wanted to make amends before he died, she'd said, her voice tight with something Marcus couldn't quite identify. He reached out to me. To your father's memory. Whatever happens tonight, you need to be there. Marcus moved through the entrance hall, past walls that displayed living art, holographic projections that responded to viewers' emotions, shifting from serene landscapes to abstract chaos depending on the mood they detected. The floor beneath his feet was temperature-controlled, adjusting to each step. Soft music played from speakers he couldn't see, an algorithm-generated symphony that adapted in real time to the conversations happening throughout the house. He heard Victoria before he saw her. The problem with these public defenders is they actually believe in the system. It makes them so earnest. So easy to destroy. Marcus turned a corner and found her in the atrium, a space 3 stories tall with a retractable ceiling currently open to the darkening sky. She stood at the center of a group that included Daniel, their brother, and Patricia, their aunt from their father's side. Victoria wore a dress that cost 6 months of Marcus's salary, the fabric embedded with light reactive threads that made her seem to glow. Her neural implant was top tier, the kind that enhanced cognitive processing by 40%. She'd told him once that she could read legal briefs at 10 times normal speed now. Marcus. She turned toward him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I almost didn't recognize you without the smell of poverty and noble suffering. Daniel laughed, but it was performative. He was thinner than Marcus remembered, his face gaunt despite the obvious work he'd had done. Neural optimization had side effects, everyone knew it, but people like Daniel kept pushing the limits anyway. His eyes flickered constantly, processing multiple data streams at once. His company, Techniest, had just gone public at a valuation that made Marcus dizzy to think about. Be nice, Daniel said, though his tone suggested he enjoyed Victoria's cruelty. Marcus is doing important work. Saving the world one food bank at a time. Hope Harbor isn't a food bank, Marcus said quietly. We provide educational programs, job training, mental health services, all very admirable, Patricia interrupted. She was their father's older sister, a woman who'd spent the last decade flipping properties in the lower districts, buying buildings at poverty prices and converting them to luxury pods for New Seattle's ascending class. Tell me, Marcus, are you still living in that awful neighborhood? The one with the actual ground-level streets? Rainier District, Marcus said. Yes, God. Victoria took a drink from a glass that hovered at shoulder height, tethered to her by a microdrone. I flew over it once. I thought I was looking at historical ruins. Marcus felt the heat rising in his chest but kept his voice level. 3,000 people live there. They're not ruins, they might as well be, Daniel said. He gestured and his own drone drink floated closer. I pulled the economic data last week. That district is a dead zone. Negative growth for 15 years. No major employers. Median income below the automation threshold. In 10 years, it won't even exist. The city will just abandon it, not if we have something to say about it, we? Victoria's eyebrow arched. You and your 50 volunteers, we're up to 200 now, Marcus said. We just got a grant, let me guess. 50,000? 100? Victoria laughed. Marcus, I bill that in a week. Do you know what I made last year? I know exactly what you made, Marcus said. I read about your defense of Apex Chemical. Congratulations on keeping those executives out of prison after they dumped toxins in the Columbia River. The temperature in the room dropped. Victoria's smile became dangerous. I'm an attorney. Everyone deserves representation, even the people who poisoned the water supply in Rainier District? The place you think is already dead, especially them, Victoria said. Because someone has to stand between emotion and justice. That's a nice way to say you took $20 million to protect corporate murderers. Daniel stepped between them. Hands raised. Okay. Let's not do this. Not tonight. Mom will be here soon, and you know she wants this to be civil. Patricia made a soft humming sound. Always the peacemaker, Daniel. Though I suppose when your entire business model is based on exploiting contract workers, you have to be good at managing conflict. Daniel's expression tightened. Techniest employs 15,000 people, employs, Patricia repeated. Such a generous word for what you do. I've seen the lawsuits. No benefits. No security. Pay that adjusts dynamically based on performance algorithms. Your workers are one bad day away from homelessness. It's the future of work, Daniel said. Flexible. Adaptive. People want freedom, people want to eat, Marcus said. I've got 12 of your former employees in our job training program. They're broken. Anxiety disorders. Depression. One woman tried to kill herself when your algorithm cut her pay by 60% in 1 week. Daniel's face flushed. If she couldn't maintain quality standards, she had the flu, Marcus said. For 3 days. Your system flagged her as underperforming and cut her pay. She couldn't afford her medication after that. She ended up in the hospital. That's not my fault, it's exactly your fault. You designed the system. Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but the room's lighting shifted. The holographic walls dissolved into images of a garden, impossibly lush and green. A voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere, the estate's AI announcing the arrival of someone important. Isabel Moreau is entering the atrium. Marcus felt his stomach drop. He hadn't known she'd be here. Stupid, in retrospect, this was her father's memorial gathering. But 10 years had passed since he'd last seen her. 10 years since she'd chosen her father's empire over the relationship they'd built in secret, 2 kids from opposite worlds who'd met at university and fallen into something that had felt like gravity. She appeared at the atrium's grand entrance, and Marcus forgot to breathe. Isabel had always been beautiful, but she'd weaponized it now. Her dress was severe, black with gold accents that caught the light like wounds. Her hair was shorter, cut in a sharp line at her jaw. Her neural implant wasn't visible, but Marcus could see its effects in the way she moved, perfectly calculated, every gesture optimized for impact. She'd been studying law when they dated. Now, according to what he'd read, she was one of the most ruthless estate attorneys on the West Coast. Her eyes found him immediately. Something flickered in her expression, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Then it smoothed into professional interest. Marcus Chen, she said, walking toward him with heels that made precise clicks on the Mars marble. I didn't expect to see you here. Your father invited my mother, Marcus said. I came as her guest. How noble. She stopped 3 feet away. Close enough that he could smell her perfume, something expensive and sharp. Still saving the world, still trying, adorable. She turned to Victoria. Counselor. I read your brief in the Apex case. Sloppy work. You left 3 precedents uncited. Victoria's jaw tightened. We won. You won because the judge was lazy, not because you were competent. Isabel's smile was poisonous. But I suppose that's the difference between us. You win cases. I win wars. She turned back to Marcus. Walk with me. It wasn't a request. She moved toward one of the atrium's side passages, clearly expecting him to follow. Marcus glanced at Victoria, who looked like she wanted to commit violence. Then at Daniel, who was staring at Isabel with something between fear and fascination. He followed her. The passage led to a viewing deck that extended beyond the mansion's main platform. Through the transparent floor, Marcus could see New Seattle 300 meters below, a sprawl of light and motion, transport pods streaming through designated airways, buildings connected by suspended walkways and aerial trams. In the distance, the old city sat at ground level, dark and mostly abandoned. Rainier District was there somewhere, a cluster of ancient streets and buildings that predated the floating city, home to people who couldn't afford to ascend. Isabel stood at the railing, looking down. "My father talked about you before he died." Marcus moved beside her, careful to maintain distance. "I'm surprised he remembered me. He said you were the only person who ever made me question myself." She turned to face him. "He said I was an idiot for letting you go. Your father never thought I was good enough for you. He was wrong." She said it simply, without emotion. "I was wrong too. But we all make mistakes when we're young. Some mistakes cost more than others. Don't be bitter, Marcus. It doesn't suit you." She leaned against the railing. "Tell me about your work." "Hope Harbor, isn't it? My investigators compiled a file when I learned you'd be here tonight." "Your investigators?" "I investigate everyone who might be relevant to my cases." "You're more interesting than I expected." She pulled her phone from somewhere, the dress must have hidden pockets, and swiped through screens. 200 active volunteers. 15 full-time staff. Annual budget of $2 million, mostly from grants and small donations. You provide education services to 3,000 people per year, job training for 500, mental health counseling for 200. Impressive, considering you have no wealthy backers and refuse to accept corporate money. We accept money from anyone who won't try to control our mission, so principled. Her tone made it sound like an insult. "My father wanted to donate. Did you know that? 5 years ago. His assistant reached out to your organization. You refused. We couldn't accept money from Chinmoro Technologies," Marcus said. "Not after what the company did to Rainier District." "Ah yes. The great betrayal. Your father walks away from billions because he can't stomach business ethics, and 40 years later you're still punishing everyone associated with the company." She turned to face him fully. "Tell me, Marcus, how many people could you help with my father's money? How many lives could you change?" "I can't change lives with blood money. All money is blood money if you trace it back far enough. The only question is whether you use it for good or let your pride turn you into a martyr." She stepped closer. "I always wondered if that's what you really wanted. To suffer. To be the noble poor man who rejected the corrupt rich girl. That's not fair, isn't it?" She was close enough now that he could feel the heat from her body. "You chose poverty, Marcus. You had options. You could have taken a corporate job, made real money, donated millions. Instead you're living in a condemned building and hand-delivering food to families who'll be in the same position next year and the year after that." "Why?" "Because someone has to show up," Marcus said. "Someone has to prove that people matter more than profit." How inspiring. She reached up and adjusted his collar, her fingers brushing his neck. "Still wearing synthetic suits? Still pretending you're too good for the system? Tell me something. If I offered you $10 million right now, no strings attached, would you take it?" Don't lie. I can see your neural data." She tapped her temple. "Basic emotional reading. You're wearing a cheap implant. No privacy screens. I can see you're tempted." Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "I would take it. And I would use it to expand our programs, honest." "I appreciate that." She smiled, and it was the first genuine expression he'd seen from her. "What if I told you that you could have much more than 10 million? What if I told you that tonight is going to change everything?" "What are you talking about? My father's will is being read in 30 minutes. All relevant parties have been invited." That includes you. I'm not relevant to your father's estate, that's what you think. She turned back to the view. I spent 3 years managing his affairs while he declined. Alzheimer's, in the end. But before his mind went, he made some interesting changes to his estate plan. Changes that involve you, whether you like it or not. Marcus felt ice in his stomach. Isabel, don't try to figure it out. You'll just give yourself a headache. She pushed away from the railing. Come on. We should get back before Victoria starts plotting how to disbar me for talking to you alone. They walked back through the passage. Marcus's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Richard Moreau had hated him. The man had called Marcus a poverty tourist once, accused him of dating Isabel just to get close to the family money. When Isabel had ended things, under pressure from her father, Marcus had always believed Richard had been satisfied. So why would Isabel involve Marcus at all? The atrium had filled with more people. Marcus recognized several faces from news feeds, tech executives, politicians, philanthropists whose donations made headlines. His mother stood near the entrance in a dress she'd clearly borrowed, looking uncomfortable. She saw him and relief flooded her face. There you are, Helen said, reaching for his hand. I was worried you'd left. Just talking to an old friend, Marcus said. Helen looked at Isabel, who had moved to greet another cluster of guests. That's not friendship in her eyes. What do you mean? I mean she's been watching you since you arrived. And not the way someone watches an ex-boyfriend. The way someone watches a target. Helen squeezed his hand. Be careful, Marcus. These people play games we don't understand. Before Marcus could respond, the room's lighting shifted again. The holographic walls displayed a new message in elegant script. The reading of Richard Moreau's last will and testament will commence in the Grand Library. All named parties please proceed. The crowd began moving. Marcus saw Victoria and Daniel exchange looks, both of them confident. Patricia straightened her spine, clearly expecting something. Other people filed toward the library with expressions ranging from bored to eager. Isabel appeared at his elbow. You're going to want to sit near the front, Isabel. What is this, justice, she said softly. Or revenge? I haven't decided which. The Grand Library was 3 stories of books that no one read anymore, preserved behind climate-controlled glass. The center of the room had been arranged with chairs facing a podium where a holographic projector waited. Marcus and his mother took seats in the 3rd row. Victoria and Daniel sat in the 1st row, center position. Patricia sat beside them. Other family members and business associates filled in around them. Isabel stood at the podium. She pulled a small device from her pocket and activated it. A hologram sprang to life above the projector. Richard Moreau, recorded before his death, sitting in a wheelchair but alert. If you're watching this, the hologram said, I'm dead. Good. I was tired. Nervous laughter from the crowd. I've spent the last 3 years of my life reviewing my choices, Richard's hologram continued. Reviewing the empire I built. The family I raised. The partnership I destroyed. I've concluded that I was an exceptional businessman and a terrible human being. Silence now. Victoria leaned forward. My daughter, Isabel, has tried to redeem our family name by dedicating herself to estate justice. She's worked to ensure that wealth goes to people who will use it properly. I'm proud of her, though I never told her that when I was alive. I was too much of a coward. Isabel's expression didn't change, but Marcus saw her hands tighten on the podium. My estate is valued at approximately $50 million, Richard's hologram said. This includes property, investments, and controlling interest in Moreau Technologies, which I've maintained through various shells and subsidiaries despite David Chen's departure 40 years ago. Victoria sat up straighter. Daniel's eyes widened. I'm leaving it all to Marcus Chen. The room erupted. Victoria was on her feet, shouting. Daniel looked like he'd been struck. Patricia grabbed the chair in front of her. Knuckles white. Other family members began yelling questions, accusations. The hologram continued speaking but no one could hear over the chaos. Isabel raised her hand and the room's audio system amplified her voice to painful levels. Shut up, silence crashed down. Let him finish, Isabel said. The hologram continued. Marcus represents everything I should have been. He's David Chen's son in spirit, not just in name. He spent his life helping people while my biological family has spent their lives exploiting them. This is not a punishment for my family. This is an attempt at redemption. Marcus will decide what happens to the money. Whether he keeps it. Whether he shares it. Whether he burns it. That's his choice. Richard's hologram leaned forward. And to my daughter, Isabel, who I know is orchestrating this reading, thank you for showing me who I failed to be. I hope Marcus does what I couldn't. The hologram vanished. Victoria turned to face Marcus. Her expression was beyond rage. It was murder written in expensive makeup and surgical enhancements. You're not taking this, she said. I will fight this until you're buried in legal fees you can't afford. Victoria, Helen started. No. This is theft. He manipulated a dying man. I never spoke to Richard Moreau, Marcus said. His voice was steady despite the earthquake in his chest. I didn't even know he was sick. You expect us to believe that? Daniel stood, his multiple data streams flickering across his eyes. You're going to stand there and pretend you didn't orchestrate this. The only person who orchestrated this, Isabel said from the podium, was my father. With my help. I spent 3 years investigating this family, my family, and compiling evidence of every crime, every exploitation, every poisoned well you've created in your pursuit of wealth. Victoria, I have recordings of you coaching clients on how to bury evidence. Daniel, I have internal emails where you describe your employees as products and resources to be optimized until depletion. Patricia, I have documentation of 15 families you evicted illegally, including one that ended up homeless with 2 children. She looked at each of them in turn. You are all exactly what my father became. Except you're worse, because you never even tried to be better. Marcus is the only person in this room who deserves that money. This won't stand, Victoria said. I'll have this will overturned. Try, Isabel said. My father had 3 independent psychiatric evaluations done 6 months before his death, all confirming his mental competency. The will is legally unassailable. I made sure of it. Marcus stood slowly. Every eye turned to him. I don't want the money, he said. What? Isabel's voice cracked for the first time. I didn't ask for this. I don't want to be part of whatever revenge fantasy this is. He looked at Isabel. You should have told me. If I'd told you, you would have refused to come. Exactly. He turned and walked toward the exit. His mother hurried after him. Behind them, the room exploded into argument again, Victoria's voice rising above the others, demanding lawyers and filing deadlines and injunctions. Marcus made it to the entrance hall before Isabel caught up with him. You can't just walk away, she said. Watch me, Marcus. This is $50 million that I didn't earn. That I don't deserve. That will destroy every relationship I have and compromise every principle I built my life on. He turned to face her. Did you think I'd be grateful? That I'd fall into your arms and thank you for making me rich? I thought you'd see the opportunity to become exactly what I've spent my life fighting against? To prove Victoria right, that I'm just a poverty tourist looking for a payday? He shook his head. I can't accept this. Then give it away, Isabel said. Take the money and donate it. Use it for your programs, and everyone will say I manipulated a dying man to get it. Everyone will say I'm a fraud. Marcus felt the weight of it crushing him. You've destroyed everything I've built. I've given you the resources to build more. At what cost? He gestured back toward the library. I just made enemies of my entire family. Victoria will spend the rest of her life trying to destroy me. Daniel will use every resource he has to prove I'm corrupt. And you, he stopped, looking at her. What do you get out of this? Revenge, she said simply. On my father for making me into what I became. On your family for treating you like garbage. On a system that rewards cruelty and punishes compassion. I didn't ask to be your weapon, no. You just asked to be left alone to feel morally superior while the world burned around you. She stepped closer. I've watched you for 3 years, Marcus. I've seen you work yourself to exhaustion for people who can't pay you back. I've seen you live in that terrible apartment and eat terrible food and wear terrible clothes because you're so committed to your principles. And you know what I've realized? You're as trapped as the rest of us. Just in a different cage. That's not true, isn't it? You could do so much more with resources. But you won't accept them because accepting them would mean compromising your identity as the noble poor man. You've built your entire self-image around suffering. I'm offering you a way out. I don't want your way out, then you're a coward. She said it without heat. You're so afraid of becoming corrupt that you'd rather stay pure and ineffective. That's not nobility. Marcus. That's ego. He felt the words hit like physical blows. Partly because they were cruel. Partly because they might be true. I need to think, he said finally. You have 72 hours to accept or reject the inheritance, Isabel said. After that, it goes to probate and the courts decide. Which means Victoria will get her lawyers involved and everything will be tied up for years. She pulled a card from her pocket and pressed it into his hand. My private number. Call me when you're ready to stop running. She walked away, heels clicking on Mars marble, leaving Marcus standing in the entrance hall with a card that weighed nothing and a choice that weighed everything. His mother touched his arm. Let's go home. They took the transport pod back to Rainier District in silence. Through the windows, Marcus watched New Seattle glitter above them, then descend as they dropped toward ground level. The city at street level was different, darker, older, marked by decades of deferred maintenance. But it was real in a way the floating platforms weren't. People walked on actual ground here. They looked each other in the eyes. The pod docked at the Rainier station. Marcus and his mother stepped out into air that smelled like rain and old concrete. Hope Harbor was 3 blocks away, a converted warehouse with lights still burning in the windows. Marcus could see figures moving inside, staff working late, or maybe residents who had nowhere else to go. What are you going to do? Helen asked. Marcus looked at the card in his hand. Isabel Morrow's private number, embossed in silver on black plastic. I don't know, he said. But I need to figure it out before Victoria figures out how to kill me. His mother laughed, but it was hollow. She looked like she wanted to, she did. Marcus pocketed the card. They all did. They walked toward Hope Harbor together, and Marcus tried not to think about the fact that $50 million wouldn't solve any of his problems. It would just create new ones. Inside the center, Keisha met him at the door. The Thompson twins are asleep in the reading room. I told them you'd be back, thank you. Bad night. Marcus thought about Victoria's rage, Daniel's betrayal, Isabel's fierce certainty, and a hologram of a dead man trying to buy redemption with blood money. You have no idea, he said. 6 weeks after the inheritance reading, Marcus stood in what used to be a textile warehouse in Rainier District and watched construction drones reconfigure the space into something that would have been impossible 3 months ago. The machines moved with precision, their AI calculating optimal load-bearing positions while human workers guided the larger decisions. Isabel had insisted on using local contractors, paying them triple the algorithmic rate. The workers moved with purpose that went beyond programming. The north wall needs reinforcement, Keisha said, appearing at his elbow with a tablet displaying structural data. The engineers say we're adding too much weight with the vertical gardens. Tell them to use the carbon fiber supports, Marcus said. The expensive ones, Keisha raised an eyebrow. You know those cost. I know what they cost. Marcus felt the words catch in his throat. 6 weeks and he still wasn't used to having resources that matched his ambitions. We're building this to last a century. Not just until the next budget crisis, Keisha's expression softened. She'd been with Hope Harbor since the beginning, back when they'd operated out of a single room and Marcus had paid her in promises and occasional grocery money. It's weird, isn't it? Actually being able to say yes, terrifying, Marcus admitted, his neural implant pinged. A message from Victoria, the 3rd one this week. He'd upgraded his implant with some of the inheritance money, not to top tier, but enough to get proper encryption and privacy screens. The irony wasn't lost on him. The message read, Tuesday morning. Literacy class. I'm teaching subject-verb agreement to adults who can barely read, and I've never felt more useful in my life. Is this what you feel like every day? Marcus composed a response through thought interface. Every day. Welcome to the addiction. Another ping, this one from Daniel. A video file. Marcus opened it in his visual overlay and watched his brother standing in front of what looked like a renovated community center, addressing a small crowd. Fair wage technology training, Daniel was saying in the video, his voice lacking its usual corporate polish. No algorithms determining your worth. No performance metrics that punish you for being human. Just training, support, and a guarantee that when you finish this program, you'll have skills that pay enough to live on. The crowd applauded. One man in the front row was crying. Marcus closed the video and realized his own eyes were wet. You okay? Keisha asked. My brother just became a decent human being, Marcus said. I'm processing. The warehouse doors opened and Isabel walked in wearing jeans and a Hope Harbor hoodie that Marcus had left at her apartment 3 days ago. She'd moved some of her work to Rainier District, setting up a satellite office in a building she'd purchased and renovated. The building now housed 4 formerly homeless families on the upper floors while her office occupied the ground level. The city council approved the zoning variance, she said, holding up her phone in victory. We can build the medical clinic. Marcus felt something unclench in his chest. They'd been fighting the council for 4 weeks, battling regulations designed to keep services like theirs out of districts like Rainier. Isabel had threatened 3 different council members with exposure of their financial dealings before the vote finally went their way. You didn't have to threaten them, Marcus said. I absolutely did. She walked to him and straightened his collar, a gesture that had become habit. This is what I'm good at, Marcus. Let me be good at it, I just don't want you to become what I was. She met his eyes. I was that person when I was hurting people for profit. Using the same skills to help people isn't corruption. It's redistribution of power, Keisha coughed politely. I'll give you 2 some privacy. She disappeared toward the back office. Isabel watched her go, then turned back to Marcus. She still doesn't trust me, she's protective, she thinks I'm going to break your heart again. Are you? Isabel's expression shifted, something vulnerable breaking through her usual confidence. I'm more worried you'll break mine. You keep waiting for me to revert. I can see it in your face every time I make a hard decision. Marcus started to deny it, then stopped. One of the things they'd promised each other was honesty even when it hurt. I'm scared, he admitted. Not that you'll become what you were. That I'll become what I'm afraid of, the money, everything. He gestured at the warehouse being transformed around them. 6 weeks ago I was operating on grants and prayers. Now I've got $50 million and I'm making decisions about carbon fiber supports like it's normal. What if this is how it starts? What if in 5 years I'm the guy who forgot what it feels like to choose between groceries and rent? Isabel stepped closer. Then I'll remind you. That's what partners do, by threatening city council members, by whatever means necessary. She smiled, but it faded quickly. Marcus, you gave away $45 million in 6 weeks. You kept $5 million for expansion and put the rest into a trust that requires your family to help others if they want access. You're not becoming corrupted. You're weaponizing wealth against itself, Isabel, and even if you did start to slip, you have 200 volunteers who would stage an intervention. Keisha would personally kick your ass. Your mother would disown you. And she touched his face. I would do whatever it takes to bring you back. Because I've been the corrupted version of myself and I know what it costs. His neural implant pinged again, this time with a reminder about the family dinner Helen had scheduled. Tonight. Same mansion, same table, different people, he hoped. Are you ready for this? Isabel asked, seeing his expression change. No, Marcus said. But I don't think I ever will be. The transport pod carried them to the Moreau estate as the sun set over New Seattle. Marcus wore the same thrift store blazer he'd worn to the inheritance reading, a choice Isabel had questioned and then understood. He needed the armor of his principles, the reminder of who he'd been before money complicated everything. Isabel wore the Hope Harbor hoodie and jeans, no jewelry except the simple band on her left hand. Not an engagement ring, they'd agreed to wait until Marcus felt steady again, but a promise ring. Her grandfather's, she'd told him. The one piece of jewelry her father hadn't been able to shame her out of wearing. The mansion looked different to Marcus now. Still ostentatious. Still excessive, but he'd learned from Isabel that Richard Moreau had planned to donate the property to a housing collective before his death. The paperwork was in process. In 6 months, this building would house 50 families instead of hosting parties for the ultra-wealthy. Helen met them at the entrance, and Marcus saw changes in her too. She'd started volunteering at Hope Harbor, teaching ESL classes to immigrants. She'd also started dating again, a teacher from Daniel's new training program, a quiet man who made her laugh in a way Marcus hadn't heard since his father died. Everyone's here, Helen said, hugging them both. And they're nervous. Good, Isabel said. They should be. They walked to the dining room together. The table was set simply, no hovering drones or holographic centerpieces. Just plates and food prepared by people, not algorithms. Victoria had insisted on cooking, which had apparently been a disaster that ended with Patricia taking over while Victoria chopped vegetables under supervision. Victoria sat at the table in clothes Marcus had never seen her wear, practical, unstylish, the kind of thing you could get dirty without mourning the cost. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked younger somehow, or maybe just less armored. Daniel sat beside her, thinner than before but healthier. He'd had his neural optimization partially reversed, trading processing speed for stability. He'd told Marcus it felt like waking up from a nightmare where he'd been moving too fast to see what he was destroying. Patricia sat across from them, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She'd aged in the last 6 weeks, or maybe just stopped hiding her age behind procedures and enhancements. She looked tired but real. Marcus, Victoria said, standing. Isabel. Thank you for coming. Of course, Marcus said, though his chest felt tight. They sat. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Helen cleared her throat. Before we eat, I have something to share. Richard left me a letter to open after the inheritance was settled. She pulled an envelope from her pocket, hands shaking slightly. I'd like to read it. Victoria's expression flickered, surprise, pain, something else Marcus couldn't identify. Helen opened the envelope and began to read. My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, one of our children proved they understand. I suspect it's Marcus, he was always the most like you. Marcus felt Isabel's hand find his under the table. Helen continued. But whoever it is, know this, the money isn't the test. The test is what they do after they receive it. Do they become corrupted? Or do they corrupt the corruption? True wealth isn't what you have. It's what you give away and who you become in the giving. The words settled over the table like weight. If Marcus received this, tell him I'm proud. And tell him to save one person, himself. He'll burn out trying to save everyone. Don't let him. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Isabel squeezed his hand. If Victoria received this, tell her winning isn't the same as mattering. If Daniel received this, tell him legacy isn't what you build, it's who builds on what you started. And Helen, my love, tell them all, love each other. Not because you're family, but because you choose to be. Helen folded the letter carefully. It's signed with all my heart, Richard. Victoria made a sound like something breaking. She pressed her hands to her face and her shoulders shook. Daniel reached for her but she stood abruptly, chair scraping against floor. I spent my whole life trying to make him proud by being successful, she said, voice raw. I destroyed people in courtrooms. I defended corporations that poisoned children. I won cases that shouldn't have been won because I thought winning was what mattered. And he just wanted me to matter. Marcus stood slowly. You matter now, Vic. I taught 6 people to read last week, she said, laughing and crying simultaneously. 6 people. And it felt like more than every case I ever won, because it is more, Marcus said. Those 6 people will teach others. What you're doing now has compound interest. Victoria moved around the table and hugged him, fierce and desperate. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything I said. Everything I did. Everything I was. You're not that person anymore. I'm trying not to be. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. But it's hard. Every day I wake up and my first instinct is to check my ranking on the legal power index. To see who I'm beating. And then I remember that rankings don't matter and I feel lost. You're not lost, Isabel said. You're just walking a different path. It takes time to adjust. Daniel stood as well. I liquidated Techniest 3 weeks ago. I've been personally delivering payments to every worker I exploited. Yesterday I met a single father who'd been working for me for 2 years. He'd never made more than poverty wages because my algorithm flagged him as suboptimal for having to leave work to pick up his kid from school. Daniel, Marcus started. When I gave him his settlement check, he broke down. He said it was the first time anyone had seen him as human instead of a productivity metric. Daniel's voice cracked. I did that to hundreds of people. I built systems that turned humans into numbers and I thought I was being innovative. You're fixing it now, Marcus said. That's what matters, is it enough? Daniel looked at him with desperate eyes. Can you fix something you broke that completely? I don't know, Marcus said honestly. But trying is better than not trying. Patricia spoke from her seat, voice quiet. I've housed 7 families. The evicted ones. Rent-free for a year. One of them is Mrs. Rodriguez, the mother of Carmen, the girl you mentor. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Carmen was 12, brilliant with numbers, dreaming of becoming an engineer. She'd been homeless when her mother lost their apartment to Patricia's development scheme. Carmen drew me a picture, Patricia continued. Of her new home. She called me the nice lady who gave us a house. And I realized, she stopped, composing herself. I realized I've spent 60 years accumulating property and I'll be remembered for one picture a 12-year-old drew. Legacy isn't property. It's people. Helen stood and moved to Patricia, wrapping her arms around her sister-in-law. David would be proud of all of you. Marcus felt the weight of it, the transformation happening around this table. His father had died believing his family would never understand what mattered. But they were learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. We should eat, he said, because someone had to break the moment before it became too heavy to bear. They ate. The food was simple, Patricia's cooking, traditional recipes from Helen's childhood. They talked about Hope Harbor's expansion, about Victoria's literacy classes, about Daniel's new training program. They talked about the families Patricia was housing and the workers Daniel was compensating and the city council members Isabel was terrifying into doing the right thing. It felt like family. Not the performance of family Marcus had endured at the inheritance reading, but actual family. People choosing to show up for each other. After dinner, Isabel touched his arm. Walk with me. They left the others talking and moved through the mansion toward the gardens. The evening was cool, New Seattle's lights glittering above them while ground-level air carried the smell of actual earth. The gardens were extensive, maintained by AI but designed by humans, full of plants that served no purpose except beauty. Isabel led him to a fountain at the garden's center, water flowing over rocks in patterns that pleased the eye for reasons Marcus couldn't articulate. She stopped there, turning to face him. Do you remember what you said to me? She asked. The night we broke up, Marcus felt the memory surface, sharp and painful. They'd been 22, idealistic and in love, and he'd seen her changing under her father's influence. Seen her starting to value winning over justice, status over substance. I said a lot of terrible things, he offered. You said, if you love me, you'll understand why I can't love who you're going to become. But if you ever become who you're meant to be, find me. I'll wait. The words hit him like evidence he'd tried to suppress. He'd meant them as ultimatum, as plea, as desperate hope. He hadn't actually expected her to remember. Let alone return. I can't believe you remember that, he said. Isabel reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. She opened it to reveal a simple band, worn metal with scratches that spoke of history. This was my grandfather's, she said. He was a laborer from Lyon. Built buildings with his hands. My father was ashamed of him, called him common. But grandfather told me something before he died. Legacy is what you build, not what you buy. I didn't understand. I thought he was just old and didn't grasp how the world worked. She looked at the ring, then at Marcus, until you built something worth more than money. You built meaning. She took a breath. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I know you need time to figure out who you are now that you have resources. But I'm asking you to let me earn you. Every day. For the rest of my life. Will you let me try? Marcus stared at her, this woman who'd been his first love and his greatest loss, who'd found her way back to him through revenge and redemption and ruthless application of principles he'd thought were his alone. Isabel, I know I don't deserve you, she said quickly. I know I hurt you. I know I chose wrong once and there's no guarantee I won't make other terrible choices. But I've spent 3 years learning how to be someone worthy of you, and he kissed her. Pulled her close and kissed her with everything he'd been afraid to feel. All the hope and terror and desperate love he'd been suppressing for 6 weeks while they'd built their partnership on professional ground. When they broke apart, she was crying. Is that a yes? She asked. I have nothing to offer you, Marcus said. I'm still living in that terrible apartment because moving feels like betrayal. I still wear thrift store clothes because expensive ones make me feel like an imposter. I'm still terrified every day that the money will change me. What kind of partner is that? The only kind I want. She smiled through tears. Also, you have a really nice ass in those jeans. I've been wanting to say that for 6 weeks, Marcus laughed despite himself. Did you just make a serious proposal and then objectify me? I'm multi-talented. Her expression shifted, serious again. Say yes, Marcus. Let me love you. Let me build with you. Let me be your partner in every sense. He looked at her, this brilliant, ruthless, damaged, healing person who'd orchestrated an inheritance coup to give him resources and revenge in equal measure. Who'd threatened city council members and housed evicted families and worn his hoodie to family dinners. Who'd chosen him twice, once badly, once right. Yes, he said. God, yes. She slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if her grandfather had worn his hands down to Marcus's exact size through decades of labor. Through the trees, Marcus could hear voices from the mansion, his family, laughing about something. Choosing each other instead of status. Fireworks exploded overhead, bright and sudden. Some party on the floating platform celebrating something that probably didn't matter. But the timing was perfect, cinematic, the kind of moment that felt orchestrated except it was just accident and beauty colliding. That's convenient, Isabel said, watching the lights. I'm multi-talented. Her expression shifted, serious again. Say yes, Marcus. Let me love you. Let me build with you. Let me be your partner in every sense. He looked at her, this brilliant, ruthless, damaged, healing person who'd orchestrated an inheritance coup to give him resources and revenge in equal measure. Who'd threatened city council members and housed evicted families and worn his hoodie to family dinners. Who'd chosen him twice, once badly, once right. Yes, he said. God, yes. She slipped the ring onto his finger. It fit perfectly, as if her grandfather had worn his hands down to Marcus's exact size through decades of labor. Through the trees, Marcus could hear voices from the mansion, his family. Laughing about something. Choosing each other instead of status. Fireworks exploded overhead, bright and sudden. Some party on the floating platform celebrating something that probably didn't matter. But the timing was perfect, cinematic, the kind of moment that felt orchestrated except it was just accident and beauty colliding. That's convenient, Isabel said, watching the lights. Suspiciously convenient. Maybe the universe is finally on our side. Marcus pulled her close, her head against his chest, and watched colors bloom across the sky. Behind them, he heard the mansion doors open. Helen's voice calling them back for dessert. Victoria laughing at something Daniel said. Patricia asking Isabel a question about housing law, his family. Not the one he'd been born into, though they were becoming the family he'd hoped for, but the one he'd chosen. The people who'd hurt each other and were learning how not to. The ones who were trying, failing, trying again. We should go back, Isabel said. 1 more minute. She nodded and they stood together while the fireworks faded and the stars became visible again, infinite and indifferent and beautiful. Marcus thought about his father, about what David Chen would say if he could see this moment. His son wearing another man's ring, standing with the daughter of his former partner, surrounded by family that had finally learned what mattered. He thought his father would approve. They walked back to the mansion hand in hand. Inside, the family had moved to the solarium, a glass-walled room overlooking the gardens where they could see the city below and the stars above simultaneously. Someone had brought out wine. Patricia was teaching Victoria how to make her grandmother's tea. Daniel was showing Helen something on his phone, probably pictures of his new training center. They looked up when Marcus and Isabel entered. Victoria's eyes went immediately to the ring on Marcus's finger. "Is that," she started. "It's a promise," Marcus said. "Not an engagement." "Not yet. Just a promise to try." "Good," Victoria said. "Because if you're getting married, I want to be involved in planning. I've spent my whole life organizing complicated negotiations. I'm very good at managing details. I'm not letting you turn my wedding into a corporate merger," Marcus said. "Our wedding," Isabel corrected. "And she can help with the details as long as she remembers it's about meaning, not spectacle." Victoria pretended to think about it. "Can there be spectacle that's meaningful?" "Absolutely not," Isabel said. "What if the spectacle serves a purpose? Like, what if we use your wedding to raise money for..." "Victoria," Marcus interrupted. "No, you're no fun. I'm a lot of fun. I'm just not your latest project." Daniel laughed. "She's been like this all week. Now that she's not destroying lives in courtrooms, she needs something to organize." "I'm organizing my entire personality," Victoria protested. "It's very time-consuming." Patricia handed Marcus a cup of tea. "Drink this. Your grandmother's recipe. It helps with stress." Marcus took it, the liquid warm and fragrant. He sat between Isabel and his mother while his family arranged themselves around the room, not in power positions or strategic locations, but just wherever felt comfortable. "I have an announcement," Daniel said. "The Morrow Foundation is investing in my training program. Isabel approved it yesterday. I was going to tell you," Isabel said to Marcus. "But Daniel asked me to keep it quiet until tonight." "How much?" Marcus asked. $2 million for the first year," Daniel said. "With expansion funding dependent on outcomes." "Isabel is very strict about metrics." "I'm strict about everything," Isabel said. "It's part of my charm, is it though?" Victoria asked. "Absolutely." Marcus felt the warmth of it spreading through him, the reality of what they were building. Not just programs or centers, but a different way of being wealthy. A way that weaponized resources against the systems that hoarded them. "What about you?" Marcus asked Patricia. "What's next for the housing project?" "I'm converting 8 more properties," Patricia said. "Rent-controlled housing for families in transition. Isabel helped me set up a non-profit to manage it." "Everyone needs a good lawyer," Isabel said. "Everyone needs a ruthless lawyer who'll threaten people into doing the right thing," Patricia corrected. "That too." Helen stood and raised her wine glass. "I want to make a toast. To my children, biological and chosen. To Richard, who gave us an impossible gift. And to David, who would be insufferably smug about being right." They laughed and raised their glasses. Marcus caught Isabel's eye across the rim of his teacup and saw her smile, genuine and unguarded. "To family," Helen continued. "The ones we're born into and the ones we build." "To family," they echoed. They drank, and Marcus tasted his grandmother's recipe and thought about legacy. About the ways people built meaning across generations, through recipes and principles and impossible choices. About how his father had walked away from billions but left him something more valuable, an example of what mattered. The evening stretched on. They talked about expansion plans and challenging cases and small victories. Victoria told a story about a student who'd written her first complete sentence. Daniel described the look on a worker's face when he'd received fair payment for the first time in years. Patricia showed pictures of Carmen's drawings, the ones that decorated her new home. Marcus listened and contributed and felt the exhaustion of the last 6 weeks catching up with him. The constant decisions about money, the pressure of transformation, the weight of trying to be what everyone needed while staying true to what he believed, Isabel noticed first. She always noticed. You need to sleep, she said quietly. I'm fine, you're running on fumes. Come on. She stood and pulled him up. We're leaving, but no arguments. Your family can survive without you for one night, they said their goodbyes. Helen hugged him tight and whispered, Richard was right. Save yourself first. You can't help anyone if you burn out. The transport pod carried them back to Rainier District. Not to Marcus's apartment. He'd moved into Isabel's building the week before, though he'd kept his old place for reasons he couldn't quite articulate. The new apartment was nicer but still ground level, still in the district, still real. Inside, Isabel pushed him toward the bed. Sleep, are you staying? Obviously. She climbed in beside him, still wearing his hoodie. Someone needs to make sure you don't wake up at 3 a.m. and start planning new programs. Marcus pulled her close. Through the window, he could see Hope Harbor 3 blocks away, lights still burning. Staff working late. Volunteers showing up. The machine he'd built running on principles instead of profit. It's working, he said. What we're doing. It's actually working, of course it's working. You're Marcus Chen. You make impossible things happen through sheer stubborn refusal to accept that they're impossible. She kissed his forehead. Now sleep. Tomorrow we have a meeting with the medical clinic architects and the city council about zoning. Marcus, right. Sleep. He closed his eyes and felt her breathing sync with his, their bodies finding shared rhythm the way they'd learned to find shared purpose. He thought about the ring on his finger, worn smooth by his grandfather-in-law's labor. About Victoria teaching people to read. About Daniel paying his debts. About Patricia learning that legacy lives in people, not property. About his father, who'd walked away from everything to prove a point that had taken 40 years to land. Marcus drifted toward sleep thinking that maybe the money wasn't corruption after all. Maybe it was just a tool, and tools were only as good or evil as the hands that held them. Maybe he could keep his principles and his resources in balance. Maybe he could save people and himself simultaneously. Maybe hope was actually reasonable. In the morning, he'd wake to messages from people who needed help and family members finding their way back to humanity and Isabel already working on the next impossible thing. He'd wake to choices about carbon fiber supports and zoning variances and how to spend money that multiplied meaning instead of just wealth. But for now, he slept. And dreamed of buildings being raised by hand, of his grandfather-in-law shaping stone and steel into shelter, of legacy measured in who remembered you and why. The universe kept turning. New Seattle floated above them, glittering and indifferent. But at ground level, in Rainier District, in an apartment that cost less than Victoria's shoes, Marcus Chen held the woman who'd orchestrated his salvation and felt, for the first time in 6 weeks, like maybe everything would actually be okay, not perfect. Not easy. But okay. And sometimes, he thought as sleep finally took him, okay was another word for victory.